Thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a real privilege to join you for Vienna Pride and to be able to present some highlights of the Fundamental Rights Agency work on LGBTQI rights. Let me start by affirming the agency's continued and steadfast commitment to advancing LGBTIQ rights in EU law and policy, both for the European Union institutions and for its member states. As all of you will know, the EU is founded on values of human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. All forms of hatred and intolerance are incompatible with those rights and values. Hatred not only affects individual victims, it is also a threat to vibrant democracies and to pluralistic societies. LGBTIQ equality therefore lies at the heart of the EU's normative commitment to equality. As such, it represents a moral imperative and is the subject of legal obligations for both member states and the EU itself. Those obligations are derived from EU primary law and also from EU secondary law. As a lawyer, I'll spare you the details of the provisions, but I will say that the Fundamental Rights Charter enshrines the right to non-discrimination and that the European Pillar of Social Rights enshrines equal opportunities. Let me turn now to speak a little bit about LGBTI surveys conducted by the Fundamental Rights Agency, as was noted in the introduction. These are among the most successful and the best responded of all of the FRA surveys. In 2024, the agency published the main results report of its 2023 survey, which was the third wave of the LGBTIQ survey. The report was entitled LGBTIQ Equality at a Crossroads, also the title of this keynote. That report provides evidentiary basis also for the European Commission's LGBTIQ+ equality strategy, which will run from 2026 until 2030. It was published by the European Commission in the autumn of 2025, and it supersedes the previous Commission strategy, which ran from 2020 to 2025. The LGBTIQ survey 2023 revealed paradoxical results. On the one hand, there were signs of slow and gradual progress, but on the other, there was a sustained evidence of hate crime, harassment, and bullying against LGBTIQ persons, which had surged to highest levels ever recorded in any of the three iterations of the survey. The reasons for that surge vary, and the survey itself does not identify the reasons nor purport to establish correlations or causation. Nevertheless, it did evidence a clear increase in intolerance, hate crime, and especially online and with social media, as well as identity-based disinformation and the weaponizing of minority groups by political parties and even foreign parties and foreign interference. At the same time, there was a clear increase in tolerance, in openness, and in diversity and inclusion. The 2023 survey results reveal signs of progress for some groups among LGBTI community at large, primarily cisgender LGB, while trans, intersex, non-binary, and gender diverse still reported very high rates of discrimination and even hate-motivated violence and discrimination. Let me turn now for a moment to the data, which after all is the core of what the survey gathered, which attests to the lived experience of persons in these communities. 54% of respondents still avoid holding hands in public with their same-sex partner, compared to 61% in 2019. 36% felt discriminated against in their everyday life in the year before this survey, compared with only 42% in 2019. 55% experienced hate-motivated harassment in the year before the survey, compared with 37% in 2019, and 67% said that they had experienced bullying, insults, and threats at school because they were LGBTIQ. Only 18% of those who said they had suffered physical or sexual violence had reported the crime to the police or any other organization, suggesting a phenomenon of hidden or invisible crime. 37%, so that 1 in 3, tragically, had considered suicide in the year before the survey. This proportion is much higher for pansexual persons, trans women and trans men, as well as non-binary and gender-diverse people. In recent times, the agency has focused on the rights of intersex persons. In 2025, the agency published Being Intersex in the EU, at the same time as the Council of Europe, the Committee of Ministers, and the Maltese presidency adopted a recommendation for equal rights of intersex persons. The survey data reveal that intersex persons face increased levels of violence, harassment, and discrimination, together with other groups that I mentioned. The agency has conducted follow-up socio-legal comparative research in 2026, covering all 27 EU member states, 3 candidate countries, about combating bullying, cyberbullying, and disinformation against LGBTI persons in education. We're currently integrating the findings of the research on younger persons with the LGBTI survey results, to prepare a report on LGBTI children and youth on the road to equality. In conclusion, the Fundamental Rights Agency calls on EU countries to address the severe victimization, marginalization, and exclusion of LGBTIQ persons, and in particular, the more vulnerable groups within the community. Member states need to protect them from discrimination and violence, as well as harassment, consistent with their obligations under EU law. EU law requires member states to ensure full equality and social inclusion of LGBTI persons, at least in employment, and the agency continues to call for an expansion of legal protection beyond employment to other spheres of life, including healthcare, housing, education, access to goods and services. This would be done through the adoption of the horizontal directive, which was adopted in 2008, and also through other measures. Let me conclude by recalling that how we treat our minorities speaks volumes to who we are as a society, and the plight of LGBTI persons and communities within Europe today should speak to the strength and depth of EU values. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. Maybe we have time for one question if there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask the agency something that you would like to know. There's one question. I will come over. There you go.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Where are you based? Are you based in Vienna or where in the European Union?
Yes, thank you for the question. So yes, we are a specialized agency, independent specialized agency of the EU, but we're based here in Vienna. So other than the large EU institutions, which are typically based in Brussels or Luxembourg, the specialized agencies are dispersed around the EU member states, and Austria is the happy host of the Fundamental Rights Agency. But I should note that the survey, the LGBTI survey, is done online. It's an online survey.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you. Okay, maybe I can ask one more question. Let me just come over there. I've asked this earlier to the representative of the Maltese government who was here. So we saw the European Citizen Initiative, which was discussed, I think, 2 weeks ago by the European Commission. Do you think there is any chance that legal measures towards the ban of conversion practices will happen on EU level? Because in Austria, we're still waiting for the ban of conversion therapies. And I know it's kind of a difficult subject for the EU to take on because of the discretion of the member states. Yeah. But do you think there is a chance somehow?
So what we would consider a top topic in terms of maybe not so much numbers, but how acute and extreme it is in terms of human rights violations, and how widespread practices are that we would consider incompatible with human rights standards. Having said that, I would say that there are a couple of issues that will continue to make this difficult, or extremely sensitive and difficult to regulate. I think one being the interface of law and medicine, and where the medical model itself has been either very vague or not spoken about, so very little understanding about what practices have been in place and how they are or not compatible with, say, human rights standards and dignity. And then the issue of consent, the issue of informed consent. The second piece is that, as you will know, there are limits on EU competence, and so in order for the EU to be able to legislate across the EU, there typically there must be a legal basis, and there must be a justification typically grounded in the operation of the internal market, for example. And that makes legislating in areas relating to health and, if I may say, morality, more complicated, and this being one. But I think the interplay of those two factors means that the prospect for legislation, to answer your question, is probably a medium to longer term prospect. I do hope that the work that we've done, both in the main survey report, which addresses this in some of our opinions, as well as the report that we issued last year on intersex, would help to raise awareness, provide information that informs the public debate. We're not a norm-setting institution, needless to say, but we try to contribute human rights expertise and critically data to be able to advance the conversation. So I'm afraid I can't be definitive in my answer to you, but it's a fair question, but I think it's a longer-term prospect.
Yeah. That's also a fair answer. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And thank you again for this very interesting and helpful keynote. Give it up once more for Siobhan.
Thank you.
Thanks.